Come on up, Congressman Mike Rogers.
Very much. All right. Good evening. Thanks, Rich. Good to follow Rich on why national security matters and why we need to pay attention to it and why we need to be more active in politics. So thanks, Mallory, for getting me here. David Nocross, Meg Thompson, for getting me here. And, thanks for a round of applause. As a member of Congress, I'm delighted to be warmed welcomed anywhere. My father, yes, you betcha. Thank you. Thanks. My dad is fond of saying, 5 boys, 4 turned out really good, and I got 1 in Congress. So any warm welcome is a good thing. I just wanted to go through quickly, by the way, and I have to tell a Navy SEAL quick story because Richard's book. I happened to be doing the after brief of the Osama bin Laden raid as chairman of the Intelligence Committee. I oversee all 16 intelligence agencies, both civilian and military. We were going through stem to stern on the review. I'm a former Army officer, so at the end of it, why a Navy Special Forces unit went was of some bit of concern right following. So I asked the Admiral as he was sitting at the table after we were all done, I pull out a map and I'm looking at it. I said, Admiral, you got to answer a question for me. I don't see water within 500 miles of Abbottabad. And he looks at me, doesn't skip a beat. He said, sir, I was pretty sure they had a pool. So, no comeback for that. No comeback for that. In a few minutes I've left, I want to talk about national security, how it's been, I think, destroyed America's image around the world, and why leadership matters, and why we need to get back to that third leg of the Republican stool that stands for a strong national security, peace through strength. And when we walk away from our normal institutions, either intelligence or military, the stories that you heard here today by Rich is what's going to happen. And we ought to say, shame on ourselves if we let this happen on our watch. The world's greatest military, and candidly, the world's greatest intelligence services in the world, we are allowing to slip through our fingers for some, I think, misappropriated anger at what we think might be happening with our U.S. intelligence services. So let me go through real quickly. I happen to go as the chairman of the Intelligence Committee, was going over to Moscow to talk about national missile defense programs here. This was early. This was right after the president was elected. If you recall, he arbitrarily pulled back the forward deployed radar system in Poland and the Czech Republic for our missile defense system. And by the way, this wasn't about Russia. You know where a missile has to fly over if it's coming to the United States and launched in Iran? Poland. Right? We want to be in Poland. They took a huge risk for us in putting those missile systems in, knowing it would irritate the Russians who were on their borders. So I happened to get there, and it was right after this fact happened, and I go into this meeting, and it is the largest human being I've ever met in my life who is wearing a uniform. Matter of fact, this guy was about 6'9", probably about 350 pounds. I don't think there was an ounce of fat on him. His hat looked funny on his head, and I wasn't going to say a word. So we sit down, we go through our meeting, it's all done. He's the head of their missile defense forces. When it was all over, meeting didn't go well. I was trying to do, A, push back on their position on missile defense, and secondly, I was trying to get a port of call for a Navy carrier group in Vladivostok, Russia. We were trying to help our problems that you would now know would have to sail through the South China Sea, which is important later. Right? They weren't going there. So afterward, he said, Congressman, I won't do my Russian accent. It's awful. Can I see you in the other room on the way out? So he puts his arm around me to walk in, and his hand is about the size of a very large dinner plate. And I'm thinking, I have seen this movie before, and I don't think this is going to end well for me as we walk into the other room. And he stopped and he turned and he said, listen, I just wanted to tell you that it's good to see that America is finally admitting she's a nation in decline. And we've been through it, and we'd love to give you all the advice and counsel you can take. Now you think about this, this was in roughly 2008, 2009, right after the president gave his Cairo speech where he apologized for the greatness and sacrifice of so many for freedom around the world. And they heard it, and it resonated. I wasn't that much longer. I was in Lebanon. There was a Christian brigadier general who was named head of their intelligence services. And I've had several meetings with him up to this point. And finally, I got done with one particular meeting, and they were having all kinds of trouble there, as you know. And on the way out, he grabbed me and he said, Congressman, would you do me a favor? Will you tell Americans not to give up on themselves? Who will fill this void for a small and tiny country like Lebanon? Who would even care? The Chinese? The Russians? He said, you know how that would end. About 6 months later, he was killed in an assassination attack, took his life. Look at where the world is today. If you want to see what the world looks like without U.S. leadership, turn on your TV. The North Koreans stand up a missile for launch, and he declares that he's going to have a nuclear attack on the western part of the United States. We kind of yawn, don't pay much attention to it. The Vietnamese are now in a light maritime skirmish with the Chinese, who have said the United States shouldn't be anywhere in the South China Sea. We want them out. 40% of the world's trade goes through there, and we have been there as a U.S. Navy since we have been a country. The Russians are certainly up to no good. There's public reports about them cheating on their nuclear test, the INF treaties. They have clearly stolen a bit of land from their neighbor in Crimea. They have also now hold 20% of the land in a tiny country called Georgia that is begging for U.S. leadership in help to stand up for the bear that we know as Russia. The Chinese are stealing our economic property at a breathtaking rate. Cybersecurity events are at the highest level ever. They're stealing our blueprints from our companies. They're taking it back. They're repurposing them, giving them to Chinese companies to illegally compete against U.S. companies. This week was a good start. They announced that they're going to indict 5 people in China. 5 people in China. There's a lot of them in China. Some thousands who are eagerly and aggressively every single day trying to come after the United States of America. And what we have done is not much of anything. And saying if we just withdraw from the world is going to take care of itself. If we hide under the desk, I think our president has shown us that he's pretty good at that. But the world will just take care of itself. It's hard out there. It's difficult. You know, the Iranians were planning a plot to blow up the Saudi ambassador in the United States of America, in our nation's capital. And they darn well almost got away with it. They had, if it weren't for the great work of a DEA agent operating in Mexico, who had penetrated one of the organized crime families down there, they're narco traffickers. And when the Iranians who vetted this individual, by the way, if you were a narco trafficker, you'd get vetted pretty good as being a pretty rotten dog. They approached him, the Iranians, about smuggling the people across the southern border with explosives to go into Washington, D.C., to blow up the Saudi ambassador. We catch them red-handed. It's amazing. It's a great case. Great case. And the other Mike Rogers, the former FBI agent who was also here, and by the way, you cannot have enough Mike Rogers in the FBI. I get that right out of there right now. We catch them. And what do we do as a nation? They're in our capital. We had tapes where they were saying it didn't matter if there was collateral damage and civilians were killed in the explosion. And what did we do? We did nothing. Now you look around the world, Iran is well on its way to get a nuclear weapon. They said, hey, the president said it was okay to enrich. We're going to enrich. A nuclear Iran is destabilizing to the Middle East, and it means we're in a new nuclear arms race. Saudi Arabia said if they get one, we're getting one. The Qataris said if they get one, we're getting one. The Egyptians, at least in the past, said if they get one, we're getting one. You can't have the Sunnis, or the Shias have one and the Sunnis not have one. How many want to live in that world? This thing is tumbling out of control. What does the president do this year? He announces the smallest standing military since before World War II. The smallest Navy, smallest Air Force. We are now assaulting our own intelligence services because we think somehow, because politicians will hold up their cell phone and say, I will stop the government from listening to your cell phone, because you know they're doing it. I've been an FBI agent. I've been an Army officer. I've been 10 years on the Intelligence Committee, 4 years as chairman. I'm going to tell you some news right now. I know 22, by latest record, of those NSA employees who have given their lives for this country, trying to get the right information to keep us safe. So every time a politician stands up and threatens to save you from the government that's listening to your phone calls is in a complete abandonment of the men and women who have taken an oath, who are risking their lives and giving their lives, both FBI agents, NSA officers, CIA officers, who stand around and used to think America would be standing with them. And now they turn around and they hear rhetoric that says they must be bad, they must be evil. Why? Because we don't trust this president. And believe me, I don't trust this president. But we had better shake ourselves out of it, ladies and gentlemen. It's only going to get worse. Boko Haram. You look at all of those agencies, Boko Haram, Al-Shabaab, Al-Qaeda in northern Africa. It's metastasizing. Why? Because the president doesn't want to make a decision. And we have got to get out of this notion that the folks are trying to get this right aren't with us. We have got to change the way we look at this and put this leg back on our three-legged stool.
Wow, let's take a couple questions. Questions?
By all the evidence, Edward Snowden was not a whistleblower, but a spy. Why have we resisted telling the American people that?
That's a great question. About 95% of all the material that the NSA leaker, of which you named, stole from us, citizens of the United States, and took over to first China and then Russia, both the bastions of internet freedom, had to do with military information. And I will tell you, I've done something unusual as chairman. I allowed all of our members to read the Defense Intelligence report on the information that we know he was stolen. It is a severe and grave threat to our national security. We have whole agencies, military agencies, whose signals and intelligence was compromised. The information that allows us to beat IEDs that keep legs on soldiers and Marines who are in harm's way, compromised. I will look anyone in the eye that says that this guy is some kind of a hero, and we ought to go out behind the barn and talk about it. He has jeopardized our military in a way that will be the largest single loss of classified material. It has nothing to do, by the way, with what he said he was angry about. It has everything to do with the tactical and strategic information that allows our military to operate around the world. And guess who has it? The Russians have it, right? Anybody that can say that. You know, all the reporters, by the way, are loving on each other, saying the reporter who printed, oh, he's great. And then the Pulitzer Prize, which is a group made up of reporters, award them an award for giving the information on classified information. All right? We ought to step out of that a little bit and ask the soldiers, sailors, and Marines if they'd like to have some of that information back, if it were their families, if it were their sons, if it were their daughters put at risk.
We've got time for one quick question.
He's a person should have never had security clearance. I would like to know if you think we will ever recover our strategic defense initiative in Eastern Europe.
Ooh, I'm very worried that we will not. And think about the position that we set ourselves up in. The people that we asked to take a huge risk, Poland and the Czech Republic, they had to read about it in the newspaper. Now, if the United States came to you and talked to you about putting it back, would you be a little nervous about that? I know I would. And I happened to meet those Polish leaders in Warsaw who told me a grand story about the Russians on the other side of the river and encouraging uprising in Nazi-occupied Warsaw. Now, this is right after this happened. So they flew me there and said, oh, they want to tell you this story. And so the Russians kept saying, do it, do it, do it. Of course, they decided to rise up in Warsaw. We all know the answer to that story. 400,000 people gave their lives, and the Nazis slaughtered them. The Russians packed up in the middle of the night and left. And he told me that story for a reason. Right? And he said, listen, we've been had before. We're not going to do this again. Remember what this president said he was going to strengthen our friends and rearrange our enemies? Oh, he's done something all right. Our allies no longer trust us, and our adversaries are emboldened. I cannot think of a worse place to put the future national security of the United States.
Website.
You can reach me at mikerogers.gov is the best place to get a hold of me.